All right, Mike, you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Mike. I got my first elk last year, cow with a rifle. Before that, I had done some deer hunting growing up in Missouri when I was younger, but just kind of started to get back into it. Going to try for archery bull this year. And I do like software development basically for Boeing.
Awesome, awesome. And do you have a PhD?
Yeah,
That's cool.
PhD, like mostly doing like robotics type stuff. So, um, yeah, I've got some experience in like Python or a couple other languages, doing some data analysis, but mostly like SciPy, a little bit of like AI type stuff.
Okay. Okay. And since you have a PhD, does that mean you had to do a study or had to do some sort of project like this before?
Not quite like this. I mean, I published papers and collected like relevant metrics and charted them and stuff like that, but not like super hardcore like data analysis, I would say. Like I've done some like simple regression and optimization type stuff, but um, probably not quite the same degree that Lance has.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. Eric?
Hey y'all, I'm Eric. I'm a grad student at Boise State. I work with Colin, and we're both doing research on the valley bottoms and riparian areas of the mountainous west. So I do a lot of remote sensing work, spatial analysis, time series analysis. Um, I'm also hoping to become a beginner hunter, so I haven't actually done it yet. But Colin has been kind enough to offer to show me the ropes of it, and I think it's well, it's an interesting project you got going on. I'm curious to see how it might be helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. And Colin.
Yeah, I'm Colin. I'm an ecologist. I'm excited about rivers mostly and restoration. Yeah, it's kind of what got me into hunting. That was like 8 or 9 years ago, and I was telling Evan essentially the way it worked out was pretty cool. I would just do seasonal jobs, and then I would just get to spend like 1 or 2 months pretty much nonstop in the woods. So I've harvested a lot of elk at this point, but I don't consider myself really a good hunter. I just spend lots of time in the woods. So that's a little different now that I'm in grad school. I just said yes to a PhD and I'm in a master's program right now. Most of the stuff that I'm doing is remote sensing. I'm trying to like predict the biodiversity of bugs that live in rivers with remote sensing tools. So kind of like bridging these large thematic gaps. And I think a lot of the statistics that Eric and I both bring to the table is more like Bayesian rather than frequentist. And yeah, I guess like I don't know, I like the idea of this project, especially in the efficacy, because I think I see a lot of like conflation. I was the same way as you, Evan. Like I didn't have any family members who hunted, and I had to wade through a lot of through like influencers, a lot of like outdoor life telling you that you needed a 300 Win Mag and a copper bullet to kill an elk, and was like, then I kind of went down just all these collective rabbit holes of just kind of people who were like not influenced by the industry and were just putting out these alarm bells of like, hey, this isn't how this actually works, and this isn't like what makes things lethal. And I think that hunting generally really suffers from like some pretty annoying masculinity of like, oh yeah, you need to draw a 90-pound bow and shoot a shoot a cannon at an elk to be effective. And I don't think that that's necessarily like, I think there's just a lot of like carryover from just 60 years ago. And so it'd be nice to take a more analytical approach and like find if there is a sweet spot or if it's like, yeah, kind of like where that return on investment kind of exists.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'm yeah, on the same page with you. I'm frustrated with the lack. I'm surprised no one's done this before, honestly. Like I don't know why this hasn't already been done as far as recovery rates. There's a lot of studies on flight distance and seeing mostly testing copper and lead bullets, but no one testing like recovery rates on mechanical versus fixed broadheads on elk specifically. No one testing big versus small cartridges and recovery rates. No one testing like location bugles versus location muse, which so we'll get into this. This is just the quick nitty-gritty of what this is I mean, I was hunting elk last year and I started recording my location bugles. And I had the idea that I was gonna, once I had enough location bugles, I was gonna go back and then run some analysis on them and see how efficient I was, how effective I was at getting a response. I was going to start doing cow mews and see which one did better, right? And then I was like, well, if I get a lot more people doing this would be a lot more effective, a lot quicker. And that's kind of why I started the YouTube channel. It turned into more than that. I had no intentions of making money off of it, but that's the part of the angle I'm going at now is I've started monetizing things so that I can afford gear and push this and spend way more time doing this study than I could justify otherwise. But the main things we're aiming to test here is location bugles versus location mews. We'll get further into that too. Mechanical versus fixed broadheads, and then big versus small cartridges, testing for recovery rates. Some key points here. The goal is to get 100 archery hunters and 100 rifle hunters this year. And we're classifying this as a pilot study for the first year, and then we'll see where we go for the following seasons. Um, for the hunters, we want them to we need to find a way to qualify them in terms of bias is a big concern of mine. This is all self-reporting, so I want to do what we can to make sure they're being honest, especially when we're talking about recovery rates and wounding animals and missing animals. That's something that's tough to be honest on. So um, haven't come up with solid qualification questions and a solid qualification process. Um, the way it's going to work is hunters are going to mark pins in their onyx. They're going to add notes depending on what kind of pin it is and what kind of response they've gotten or what kind of shot attempt it is. They'll then add those to pre-named folders or dedicated folders. And then at the end of the season, they'll send those folders to us, and then we will process that data. The goal is to share this right now. I want to make this data as public as possible. Did I freeze? There we go. I want to make this data as public as possible. I mean, I want to publish like the raw data as much as we can so people can run their own analysis on it too. I think that'd be awesome. I'm not sure how we're gonna display it in a consumable way. I do have a website that I've been working on, so we could put it there. But I want it to be available to the public. Long story short. Um, a key part of why I have you guys on here is I want this to be held to very high standards. I have a feeling this is going to draw a lot of controversy if it works out how I intend here. So I want this to be able to be held up to a magnifying glass. I also want the opportunity to publish to an actual publication, an actual journal. I've never done anything like that. I'm not sure how rigorous that would be. So I'd really love your guys' input on that and the things required for that. So. Any questions or comments on that so far?
Yeah, I guess my initial question is, are you drawing a distinction between the location data and the efficacy data? Like, are those going to be two separate data sets that you're trying to collect?
When you say efficacy data, do you mean like on shot attempts? Like right.
Yeah, broadhead fixed versus yeah, and then small cartridge, big cartridge, and then but then you also had location muse,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. So that'll all be separate right now. I would like to find in future years to find a way to merge together and connect them in some way. But right now, the way we're going to set it up is there going to be four separate folders in their Onyx. There's going to be location bugles, location muse, archery shot attempt, and rifle shot attempt. And then
Mhm.
when they put the pins, they'll add it to one of those four folders, depending on what their action is. And then we can analyze those separately.
I guess I'm just wondering about like hunters' willingness to like share their Onyx points versus their experience with like, hey, I shot this elk at 38 yards and I never found it, you know?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be the biggest struggle. Is getting people to do that. I think one thing, Lance, that you and I talked about is making sure this is anonymous as possible. I think that will help people being willing to share that data with us, and also the fact that we'll never share any unit specific data or share any GPS specific data is the or any names or anything like that. The closest we'd get, I think, would be state specific data, just because I've heard so many people say people or elk in Oregon don't respond to bugles or Colorado they don't respond to bugles. So I think it'd be interesting to have that kind of data.
Yeah, one thing to kind of touch on that is, I mean, making it so the hunters, because I know hunters don't want to share that location at all with most people. So making sure that we tell the hunters, hey, we're just going to be able to ones seeing their location stuff. Everything else is going to be state specific. I think that'll really ease some minds on some hunters. I think it still might be an uphill battle, but I think we'll probably have enough people not to have that, be a really big issue.
I think so too. I think so too. But we'll find out. We'll find out. Okay, so we're going to go over just the four different actions, the different types of bugles or different types of location calls, and then the different type of shot attempts. I'm going to move this out of the way. And these are rough definitions. I did my best to be as specific as possible so they could be standardized. But these are open to your guys' modifications and what you guys think would work best. So location bugle is a single vocalization produced by Hunter using a bugle tube with an open or closed reed, made specifically with the goal of initially determining if that bull is present, to get a response out of them. One thing I'm trying to do with this definition is distinguish a location bugle from a call-in attempt. This will be only to determine if there's a bull in the area. And I did that with some of these caveats here. This will be a cold call rule, no visual or audio detection of that bull any point during that day, before you make the call. And this excludes any back and forth sequence, like you're trying to call an elk in, you saw an elk bed, any call-in attempt like that. Um, A big one I'm not sure on right now is a pure bugle only. I wanted to standardize an actual location bugle to some extent. So I was going to exclude any raking, any chuckling attached, but it wouldn't exclude any type of aggressive bugling, any lit ball or anything like that. That's something I'm still unsure on at the moment. Success metric is just going to be if they hear a bugle response when they're bugling or within 30 seconds of when they end the bugle. And then it's also important that seeing an elk does not count. We're only counting if they hear a bull bugle back to them. Anything on that one? Okay. How do we feel about the pure bugle only, as far as not telling hunters that they can't be raking or chuckling on the end of their location bugle?
I think just in the interest of simplicity, my suggestion would be to just have like a drop down or like have a couple of options. Like what kind of call was this? Was it a back and forth? Did you hear something and then call at it, or was it a cold call? Because like people are gonna be doing different things, and it's easier to just say, "Oh, this is what I did," than like to remember a bunch of rules. I think personally.
Yeah, that is the big struggle here, is trying to balance simplicity versus standardization here. But I don't know how to do a drop down in Onyx, so I want this all to be recorded in Onyx.
Well, yeah, you
Um,
could just say like, I don't know. I was gonna say you could just say tell people like was it one like in your because you have to have some kind of description about like what you have here, like what is this data piece, and you could say like options are either interactive or cold call. um but I think it also begs the question like maybe Onyx isn't the best uh approach. I don't know, it might be like a
um,
Google form or something like that. I don't know.
Well, the reason I'm thinking of using Onyx, or we're planning on using Onyx, is because it records so much data already. Like it automatically records where they're at, so it records their GPS location, time and date stamp, and it records um, their elevation if they're online. And it's something they're already using too. I feel like it'd be hard to convince hunters to try to use a different software in the field than they're already going to be using. Um, but there are a lot of limitations with it, like what you're pointing out.
Yeah, no, I mean it makes sense. I'm just kind of, I don't know, trying to think through how like I would want to do this.
That's exactly what I want to hear from you. It's
Yeah.
exactly why you're here.
So I guess I would think through maybe like reverse engineer the process, right? Like, what are your goals with this information, and then work backwards from that. And like, so like when I'm running around the woods in September, I think about them as very different things. Like I'm running ridges full speed, like tossing out location bugles, and that's what I'm doing, like that's it, kind of end of story. And if I get into elk, then it's like soft muse, but that's a totally different pace. It's like full blast fast until I'm super slow. And and I understand that people have different hunting styles, but like I don't think it's that. I do think that they're different things. Like when you're in elk and you're like having a conversation with a bull or a bunch of cows or whatever that looks like. Like if you're in a harem of elk, it's crazy. It's a totally different thing than being like, I've been in this unit for 6 hours. It's midnight. I'm running ridges. Like, where are the elk? That to me feels like a totally different thing than any type of like, oh yeah, chuckle, lip ball, like aggressive, it's like they're different things, I would say.
Okay. Does this definition not distinguish between those? Because that's what I'm trying to do. I do want to distinguish between when you're running a ridge line, calling your ass off every couple hundred yards versus when you're in elk. That's what I want to distinguish between.
Well, I think you'd be kind of limiting your data because like how much are you actually cold calling compared to all your calls? Like again,
Mhm.
I think uh it's gonna be I think it's gonna be hard to collect a lot of data with some of the rule and I don't know to Colin's point, like is that I guess is cold call only like relevant associated data like what you're after, or is it or are you trying to get these different types of data associated with these different types of hunting?
For this one, it's really just cold calling. I did initially when I started this study, I wanted something called call intents because I wanted to include some sort of data where you were interacting with the elk. Because that's half the battle, right? You got to locate them first, and then you got to get them in range. So I wanted to include something like that, and it wasn't until about a month or two ago I realized I think that's going to be too complicated as far as standardizing data, at least this year, to try to standardize what a call and attempt is when you're interacting with the bull, when you're not, when you think this is there but you're not sure. Um, so part of the reason I'm doing cold calling only right now, or at least that's the idea, is because that's what a lot of hunters struggle with in the field is just finding elk in the first place. But I know that's not, obviously we need to get in range of them. You got to call them in. Um, but if you guys have a better way to tackle it, you know what I mean? If you think it's worth it to include some sort of interaction data, um, I'm all ears.
So I guess just like would your questions be, um, would your questions be like, what's the best time of day to call? Like, is there actually a spatial difference between Idaho and Oregon? Like, is that the kind of question that you're after, or are you more after like behavioral distinctions between herds, or like what's the best type of call? Like, what's the question that you're really trying to answer?
More of the former this year. So part of the questions I want to answer, oops, too far. I guess it was the next one.
Yeah, just to provide like a little more like
Sure.
context on that, like I just got done with turkey season and I was really struggling with do I need to be more aggressive or less aggressive? Like
Mhm.
there's like two very solid like trains of thought out there and it's either like call way, way, way less or like, you know, call a bit. If you don't hear anything, sit an hour, leave. Um, and I think, you know, the you might just be only capturing a little bit of that. But if that's kind of, you know, what you're after, then
Well,
reasonable.
I certainly want to capture as much as we can. Like I certainly want to capture like do aggressive bugles work better than softer bugles? Like does a lip ball help? Does a chuckle help? You know what I mean? I absolutely want to do that. I just don't know how to standardize that yet. Um, I just don't know how to standardize that yet. That's my main struggle. I absolutely do want to include those things too. Um, but so what I was thinking with the location bugle, the things I was trying to target was A, just a general response rate on cold calling location bugles, as far as what you can expect in the field. Um, B, high versus low calling volume. So if you're calling in a day, if you call 5 times versus if you call 50 times, you have a higher chance of hearing a response. Does that matter at all? Something we could tie into is the GPS data. If we can see if you're bugling every 200 yards versus every 500 yards, if that affects your success rate in hearing a location bugle back or hearing a bugle back at you. Other things that we could look at too are obviously the time of the month. How does your success rate for hearing a bugle increase throughout the time of the month, throughout the time of the day? We could tie in moon cycle with that, the weather, your elevation, distance from your previous bugle, which I already mentioned, and then also we can compare it to the success rate for a location mu, and then like I mentioned earlier, state and area and how they compare to each other.
One question I have is about the scope of the paper. Um, do you feel like the bugle questions are really important to what you're trying to get at, or is that more of a secondary question? I think it could be an issue with this like first paper to try to do too much and ask too much of hunters to record a bunch of data in the field. Um, it might be hard to get consistent data from all the different hunters.
Yeah, so there's two parts of that, right? It's like, well, this is a lot to include on one paper. And that was the question I've written down here is we're trying to test efficacy of broadheads and rifles and then combining that with location bugling, right? I was like, do those need to be separate papers? That's a question I have for you guys, right? I don't know. Um, and then as far as hunters recording a lot of data, that's the other part too, is if you're an archery hunter, you're probably going to be, I want you recording the location bugles or location muse, and then your shot attempt. Um, there's a lot of rules to remember, basically on what a location bugle is. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible for the hunters while keeping it standardized. As far as what the hunter will have to actually record on a location bugle, I location bugle a lot, so all I was recording last year was I just hit mark my location and then add to folder. That's it. And then if I hear a response, I type response yes. Or we might just not even label the variable, we might just type yes in the notes, and that's it. So streamline for hunters as far as location bugles. And then as far as Muse, I was also going to have them record how many Muse they did. Because generally you don't just do one location Muse, you do a whole series of them, do a whole sequence of them. That might complicate things too much. We could just do the same as location bugles, where if they hear a response, they hear a response. If they don't, they don't. Um, and then shot attempts is where I put a lot more data in and where they have to record a lot more data. But it should only happen once or twice a year. So I was thinking that would be more reasonable to have a lot more data points on that. What are your thoughts on that, Eric? Is it on those 2 points?
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not very familiar with the Onyx platform and how streamlined it is.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Does everyone else here use Onyx? Yes, yes. Mike, do you use Onyx? Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
I use Onyx.
Cool. And then to the first point too, is this too much to include on one paper? Do we need to split this up? Yeah.
So one thing I've been thinking about is I feel like for this year, it might be best to just, see if we can collect this data, see if we can find any findings, and then kind of get some more momentum so that next year we can actually get, sink our teeth. And if we wanted to write, I feel like a paper is probably not the best word for it, more like an article about our findings might give us a little bit more wiggle room with things and make our lives a little bit easier than trying to fit everything into an academic paper or a paper for that matter. I do think this year probably should be just like you said, like a pilot, seeing if we can get hunters to cooperate with us, and I guarantee we'll find a whole lot of holes in our thinking, and we'll be able to clear that up for next year.
So Lance, do you think like we would still, or Evan, like how Evan would present it in a video, like it would be more like maybe more tailored towards learnings, or do you think it would be like here's like the raw, like would we publish the or would he publish the data, for example, you think?
uh I think this year definitely we can get some really cool things to make a video about, and I do think we'll be able to maybe make not like a website, but like some way to display this data, like a dashboard, just for the few findings we have. I mean, having only 100 hunters here and there, but I do think we'll get a lot of data. I'm hoping so. I guess that's just going to be when we get the data, what can we extract from it on the user side of things of like, oh, we have this much data from Idaho, this much data from Oregon, Colorado, Utah, and then kind of showing overviews of patterns and things like that. I think we'll have some stuff to say. More broader, I think we will have some good learnings and good things to talk about too. And then I think we'll be able to refine our approach for next year.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. This first year isn't meant to be the final draft. This first year is meant to be, okay, we're going to test this thing out, see how it goes. I think we'll be able to draw some conclusions, maybe not solid conclusions, but we'll at least be able to get some good insights on if certain data is pointing really strongly in one direction. And then for the next year, we hopefully will recruit even more hunters, get more data, and then refine how the process of how it works. and clear a lot of our blind spots, and I'm sure we'll have clear those up.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on it is that I personally think it's going to be most streamlined to separate those two questions, the spatial data on bugles and then the efficacy data on shot attempts. And I think that I feel that way for a couple different reasons. Um, One is because, well, I think one cool way that you could sell this kind of like somewhat arduous process of recording your bugle attempts is to people, hey, are you curious about whether or not you're overcalling or undercalling? And our data will kind of like, we will provide you with feedback of where you are relative to other people in how much how often you get an attempt, and we'll give you like personalized feedback on whether or not we think you're overcalling, undercalling, about your pace of travel, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that would be one really cool way and super helpful and make this kind of like a more reciprocal thing among hunters. But then I think when you're moving into shot efficacy, there's a couple issues with translating these two things. One is that 10% of people are successful. So if you're trying to get 100 archers and 100 rifles, then you have 20 people who actually took a shot, or maybe it's 50% success rate with a bow. So it's 20 people that took a shot and 10 people that actually like harvested an elk, right? So all of a sudden your sample size is super smushed relative to like if you say, hey, if you had a shot attempt, we want to know about your cartridge caliber, bullet, etc. And then the last part of that is just the fact that like there are situations where rifle, you're not calling. So like automatically you're ixnayed from the data set of like of data. Last year I was in 100 head of elk. I didn't make a single noise. You know what I mean? Like I shot an elk on day two because I was just slipping the herd nonstop. And it was like, am I gonna call it? Hell no. Like I'm in 100 elk. And like the year before that, I was running ridges all day trying to find elk. And so that would be a time where I would be like, cool, this would be a good time for me to contribute to my data set. But I think that if you are lumping them together, I think that you are introducing bias in in asking people to record even when the situation isn't appropriate. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. Well, so to clarify one thing, I guess I wouldn't be asking them to record any calls they wouldn't normally do.
Mhm.
So as far as location views, I'd only be asking to call if they would normally call. Like I understand some archer, or I'd probably want some people to study who aren't going to call at all, because then we'd have a comparison between high calling frequency versus low calling frequency. Um, and then also too, I'm a little confused on what you mean by separating them, because I do think it's separate data points completely. Do you want them to be? Would you have them be separate actual people too? Like you'd only have one set of hunters record for calling, and then one set of hunters record for shot attempts.
Uh, well, I think that there could be a Venn diagram where like one is completely inside the other. Like maybe if you
Okay.
were part of the uh, calling research and you also had a shot attempt, you'd obviously be welcome. But I just think that like 10 data points is really not a lot. Like 20 data points is it's really hard to say that the reason why a six Creed was effective and a 300 wasn't on 10, that's just not data. Those are spurious correlations at that point. And so I think if you had 100 shot attempts that were mechanical versus fixed, and it was that lower barrier to entry for hunters to get in there and say like, hey, yeah, I did, and then you would only be sampling people who like quote unquote like made a shot, who like hit that 0 and 1. But if you only try and reach out to 200 people and then 20 of them are successful by the stats, your data set on efficacy of small versus big cartridge is, in my opinion, not adequate.
Y- Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And that's why this first year is more just testing the process and to get what insights we can. Because I understand, yeah, I was in Utah, the average success rate here is about 5% and 7% for archery, 10% for rifle. Really, really low, right?
Yeah.
I expect the shot attempts to be double that, honestly, especially for archery. Rifle 20%, 30% more. Um, So I'm still not sure though on how in my way the way we'll get more people next year is by running this process, and then hopefully next year we'll get more well known for it, and then we'll have maybe 1,000 people sign up, right? So how are you saying that we should get more people to sign up this year? I'm unclear on that.
Oh, just that like you could have them as two separate research questions, two separate research programs, two separate vetting things where it was like, hey, do you want to be a part of this about a part of this thing on efficacy? Because like the guys on EXO are like freaking out about small cartridges right now, right? Like
Yeah.
their podcast and like forum is going nuts and like the whole industry. And so I think that if you posed to unknown munitions, to EXO, like to all these people, like hey, and you stayed in one lane. Like I think that personally, I think when you start to get into like, oh, we're doing this spatial thing, we're doing bugle return rates, it's cool, but like I think that you're gonna get you there would be a potential to have 1,000 hunters this year who are like, hey, I took a shot at an elk and I used a 7 rem mag. And like you get one interview on the EXO podcast, and all of a sudden you have a data set that's 1,000 that's 1,000 people because it's so simple. Because it's just like, hey, we just want to know like whether or not you wounded an animal. We just want to know whether or not you know, but but am I going to run into my spot and give this stranger all my onyx pins and stop and record an onyx pin every single time when I got this bull bugling and screaming in the bottom? Like, just frankly, I wouldn't do that. Like, I
Mhm.
would just be like, nah, dude, like, there's a bull screaming 80 feet below me. Like, I'm not thinking about, like getting this pin down right now. And so,
Mhm.
I just think that I think that if you separate them, you have the ability to make both data sets better. Personally,
Yeah,
Okay.
I
I like
I,
that.
I agree entirely, and I think to both points, like you don't want to unnecessarily introduce these biases, and also like you just want to keep it as simple as possible. I um I I almost wonder too, or like in a related way, like if maybe the collection should be more abstract for like the first go, like kind of what Colin was alluding to. Like maybe it's just like at the end of the day, there's like a form. It's like this is what I was hunting with, and you know, someone could write like a couple sentences about like well, I generally start out in this area. They could describe like maybe the terrain or whatever, the exact location, however level of input they want to give, and then they can just describe I was really aggressive about my calling, but I didn't really hear anything, and then this you know cow walked right out in front of me, kind of randomly. Um, I did find I was just doing some like googling, and there's an app on Android at least, and I just kind of did a little test of it called GPS audio recorder, and it basically records like a little sound sample and like associated GPS data, and like I think again, like if I'm having a back and forth with a bull, I'm not gonna pull up my phone and write down a bunch of like text notes and trying to, I'm not gonna have a checklist for like, okay, what did I need to put in this again? But like, I might just like click a button and just do like a 30-second whisper, like, hey, I'm working on this bull, he's real noisy, but he's hung up at 100 yards or whatever. And then like the data will already be associated with it. I think there's still like an opportunity for bias to get in there, but at the very least it would simplify it and you have some of the data you're trying to get.
Okay.
Just a thought. I mean, you got to convince people to download a new app, which is going to be hard too. I think there's definitely a convenience associated with Onyx, but you know everyone's got 1,000 apps on their phone these days. It's not that big a deal.
Okay.
Um, I was also wondering out of curiosity, do you have an idea of how many people like have expressed interest, or like do you have any idea? You think like 200 is like pretty reasonable, or
I don't know. I haven't pushed it since I started the channel. When I started the channel, I had, I don't know, like me and my girlfriend subscribed, and I was getting like 20 views a video. And that's when I was pushing this project, and I had no one sign up for it. And then I started making it more about educational, but totally others, like about finding elk, right? And that video blew up and has like 50 or 60,000 views now. And I haven't pushed it since then. Um, my latest video that just dropped an hour and a half ago, I mentioned it in there, and I'm gonna start pushing it harder too, so I can get people to sign up. So 200 in my head, I don't know. I really don't know. To me, it sounds like a lot of people, but I understand we need a much larger data set, especially for shot attempts. For location bugles and location views, I don't think you'd need that as much of a sample size. Um, I don't know. I don't know is the answer to that. I do like the idea of separating them because I think if I'm separating them, I think that'll make it way easier, like you're saying, to get people to sign up for the shot attempts for rifle and archery. I think that'll make it way easier, especially if, like you said, I go on Rock Slide, go on these various forums and post, or even run ad that I'm doing a study or doing a research project. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I don't know. Do you listen to the EXO podcast at all?
Yeah, yeah. I haven't
Yeah.
listened to them in the past couple months, but I know they had Forum on recently. I haven't seen it though.
So they're doing that whole experience project, and I feel like generally they just trend towards they're trying to get to the root of like science. Like they had that guy who runs the archery shop who did mechanical versus broadhead success rate, right? And so I think that those guys and the unknown munition guys, like I think that there are people in the industry who would be stoked if you approached it from like a purely like, hey, let's collectively as a group figure out the efficacy, like let's put it into a study, let's do it, then I think you might have like 5,000 people who have no reason to lie at all. Like it's all going to be anonymized. There's no like, it's not like you're walking into an archery shop and you're like, oh yeah, dude, I nailed this bull at 100,000 yards. It's like, oh yeah, you're just like putting it into the abyss and you just did it just for science. I think
Yeah,
that separating those two questions, because you're right, you're going to get a lot of data from the bugle points. Like there's going to be, if you get 100 people who are like dropping you tracks and waypoints, it's going to be an immense amount of data wrangling to deal with that like size of a database. You get like 20 bugles a day times 100 people times a 10-day hunting season. Like that's a big thing to deal with on your end computationally. But I think that like, yeah, you have the opportunity to make it easy for people and get, a thousand answers to full on shot attempts. And that I would be excited about seeing that like in a peer reviewed literature or in some type of like, I think that even from a selfish self-serving standpoint for you, like I think that would put your name on the map kind of in a way that Jay Nichols rolled up and was like, hey, I'm going to be unbiased about gear. If you rolled
yeah,
up and you were
yeah.
like, hey, I'm going to be unbiased about shot lethality, like maybe a 6 Creed is too small, like
Mhm.
maybe a 223 is too small. And maybe like you're the person who gets to the bottom of that.
Yeah, yeah. Lance, you wanted to say something?
I guess just touching on the I guess the data size issue, I don't think that's going to be that computationally heavy. I mean, we're not, we're talking maybe a few hundred megabytes, maybe even a gigabyte at most. I can process that no problem. So I don't think that's something to kind of worry about. But I do like what you're saying though about splitting it up a little bit and getting more shot attempt data so we can actually sink our teeth into some findings.
Yeah, I think if my channel keeps growing, hopefully if it keeps growing quickly, I think I have a good chance of and depending on how I approach them, I have a good chance of getting those guys on board. I think that'd be awesome. Um, my only concern with that is introducing bias because those guys are heavy into the small cartridge, right? And I have that bias too. But how do I deal with that, right? I don't know. I guess I could go and get Tim Sundles or some guys that are like heavy into big cartridges or reloading Weatherby, right? Um, that'd be my concern with getting that many people from those groups.
Well, I don't think that it would actually end up like confounded from a statistical standpoint. I don't think it would end up confounding your data really because you would just have a measure of foot-pounds of recoil, like foot-pounds of recoil in the shot, and then and then how many, and then you would model that as like a continuous variable, and then you would have a Bernoulli response, 0 or 1, like lethal or not, as the response, and then it would just be like a continuous variable, and then a 0 or 1, like binary, dead or not dead, and then it wouldn't really matter because even if you had like technically like a skewed data set towards 6 Creeds, like there's still plenty of people who are going to shoot a 300 win or a 7 PRC, and they're just like they don't give a
Yeah.
damn.
Well, so what I mean by that is I mean honesty. Like if people are like if they have this hard belief that they need to use that small cartridges are better and they miss or wound an elk with a small cartridge, they're probably going to be less likely to report that. And same if they lean very heavily towards big cartridges too. So that's where I'm concerned with that. That's where it might be confounding.
Yeah, it's a hard one to deal with. You're totally right. And I guess to me, the way that we present this is like totally anonymous. Like your name's not going anywhere, this data's not going anywhere. Like, and like, Joseph Von Benedict might get on and be like, "Oh yeah, I shot an elk at 1,000,000 yards with a cannon and it was successful." Like you might have people who really, but I think that the majority of hunters are just like they're just like us, where we're like, "What is it? Like, do I go shoot a moose with a 223? Like, maybe
Yeah,
not,
most people just
And so like
genuinely want to know.
and like, okay, so for instance, that's how I came to this whole thing is I like shot a bear with a copper bullet and then it just disappeared into the woods. And I was like, what happened? And then I went on a deep dive. And I think that there are a lot of people who want answers. And I think if you pitch it as like, hey, we are collectively looking for answers, this only works if you're honest, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
I like it. I like it. Let's talk about the data set I was looking to collect for shot attempts. We'll just talk about rifles for now because it's a lot. And I was under the context that this only happened once or twice a year. Um, so I wanted them to record this data in their Onyx, which all of these data points here, after they make a shot attempt. And what I was the way I was going to make it practical for them is I was going to send them each a pin, share them a pin in Onyx, and then when they mark this pin, hit mark my location, they can just hit copy. They can highlight this text, copy it over in the notes of their current pin, and then write yes or no or 30 or 40 or whatever the answer is. Um, Tell me if you guys think this is too much to include since we're going down the path of simplifying this and trying to make it practical for them. Number of shots fired. Most elk from the studies I've read, a lot of them take more than one shot. The majority of them take more than one shot. Do they need it? I don't know, but they end up firing more than one shot. Um, Shooter position, not a necessary one, but I think it'll provide some insight because I do think my bias, a lot of people practice from the bench way too much for some reason, myself included actually. Animal position, should we, again, not a necessary one, but should we, how often is it broadside? How often is it frontal, especially for archery? The shot distance, I was going to limit it to the first one, it's assuming there's multiple. How far is the shot? If the animal is hit, that'd be very, I don't want to say subjective, but I feel like that's going to be wrong a lot of time. People are going to think they missed when they actually hit something. Um, if the animal was recovered, that's a yes or a no. Recovery distance. If the animal was recovered, how far did it go from where it was shot? Antler points, again, not a necessary one, but I think that'll be interesting as far as bigger bulls versus smaller bulls and how that factors into the equation of cartridges. The bullet name and the bullet weight. The bullet name is my way of trying to figure out what bullet they're using, um, whether it be a copper bullet, a lead bullet. Um, Also, what if it's a lead bullet, what kind of construction it is, whether it's like an ELDX, like a soft bullet, or whether it's a bonded bullet. We'd have to create a separate table that has all these bullet names and what kind of bullet it's made out of, or what the construction is. Um, we'd get a lot out of that. We'd get a lot of insight out of that, assuming we have enough data points. What are your guys' thoughts on all those data points?
A lot of data points. I think it's going to limit the number of people that actually unbiasedly participate, to be honest.
Okay.
Like either even people who are interested once they get out there and then they're sitting in their truck and they've got a bull in the back and they're like, okay, I got to fill this thing out. Like I don't know. But you might one idea, and I don't know if you've obviously we got a couple smart academic folks on here, like maybe if this was like in association with the university and there was a professor who like got some funding and maybe like every person who participates, you just take their word for it. But I don't know, maybe that doesn't work actually. But I don't know, maybe you get some funding to be like, we're gonna do a $100 gift card to Shields or something like that. I don't know, for someone who participates. Just or I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out ways to like lower the barrier to entry, right? Because I think this might scare some people away.
Okay. I don't know how I'm trying to find ways to motivate people essentially to hop on the
Yeah.
study and record the data. I don't have any money to pay people to do it, and I don't know if
Well,
I can
yeah.
get a
So like,
university to sign on
might be able
yet.
to get some grant money or something. Like, there is
Yeah.
interest and demand for this data,
Okay.
and also like we could for this first year just make it simpler. Like, stick to shots on, and what cartridge or something like that.
Okay.
Um,
One thing we could do, I feel like a lot of these are things that are going to be consistent for the same hunter. I feel like everyone's going to shoot the same cartridge, same bullet, same, bullet name, all that stuff. I feel like we could probably just have them enter that into a Google form, like when they sign up, or at the end of it, so that we don't have to have them enter in those things, and then we can maybe limit a few of these down. But I feel like some of these we can kind of just get off the rip from when someone's signing up or something like that. I mean, how many hunters do you know that change, guns midstream? I guess someone using someone else's gun, but
Some people do. I've
yeah,
definitely changed mid-season before, not mid-season, but right before the season. So it'd have to be after, I think, but I think that's a great idea. Um, Limiting the barrier or the requirements for them to do it in the field when they're gutting the bull, when they tire compacting it out. I think that's a great idea. Um, okay. So we could include, if we're going to do a Google form, we could include, um, and I don't know if this is the best way to record this data, but basically the cartridge, the bullet name, the bullet weight, those three big things. And then we could, shooter position is not critical. Animal position is not critical. If animal hit, that's an iffy one for me. If recovered, obviously that's critical. We could just do if recovered. I mean, if we're going to do bare bones, it would just be if recovered.
I think like if recovered, and like if you're having people like uh well, I guess maybe in this one you're not trying to tie GPS data to it, but um yeah, if recovered and cartridge, maybe like an approximation of distance. I think that would be reasonable.
yeah, I think distance would be helpful for sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm biased here. I definitely think of it as like the other way. Like I like thinking about, I mean, I am a scientific minded person, and so maybe that's just my personal philosophy, but I definitely like going, I think about it in the other direction. Like I had literally have a notebook of like all of my misses and all of my kills, and it's like, and all that stuff is on there, and I would definitely be interested in picking apart that data more so. And I guess just like after I harvest an animal, like I'm excited to I'm excited to figure out why it worked or why it didn't work. And so I there's definitely some personal bias there, but I think just like you could definitely ride off the coattails of people's excitement of harvesting an animal. And yeah, my personal plug would be when I think about bias, the biggest bias I can think of is like how many days somebody shoots in a year. And so like if you're shooting 10,000 rounds in a year, it's way different than 100. And if you shoot your bow for 6 months out of the year, it's way different than like, I think that there's like some huge amounts of shooter bias that I personally would think that you might go try to get after in some of this data of like, hey, do you pick up a 20, 30, 40 pin and just go to this, go to the archery store in at the end of August, or are you shooting tack and, you know, in year round? Are you shooting your 3D course year round? Like those are two totally different people. And I think that you would want a way to kind of like distinguish that type of bias within the data set.
Yeah, and that's well, part of what I want to do when we sign hunters onto this is have a form, when they first start too, and it'll ask questions like that. I'm not sure on the exact questions I want to ask yet, but that'll definitely be on there. Um, okay, okay.
I was
We're out of
thinking,
time here. Go ahead, Eric.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Never mind. It's not that important.
Okay, okay. I gotta go right at 8. A lot of good notes. I really appreciate this, guys, and this helps out a lot because all of this stuff is how I interpret it and how I would do it if it was only me doing everything, right? But I'm not all the hunters that I want to sign on. So and you guys have way more experience in the technical field, running data and doing software than I do. So I really appreciate you guys' time. If you guys would like, I'd like to meet with you guys on a recurring basis, like once a month. I think would be awesome. Um,
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think just we could do this once a month or maybe even twice a month and just hash it out, kind of figure out what makes sense to us, or you could even ask the viewers like, what is your level of like willingness to participate? Maybe
I could put up poll for that. That'd be awesome. That's a great idea. Would you guys be open to meeting quite once every 2 weeks?
that's fine by me most of the time.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure I'll miss here, one here or there, but
yeah.
That works.
and if we're, if we're taking notes, if we've got like some Google Drive or Doc or something where we're kind of spitballing and taking notes, that might be helpful too.
Yeah, I'll get you guys. I just made this Google Sheet. I'll get you guys added to it. Hopefully we can make it look a little prettier too. It has tasks, definitions so far, and the questions and concerns. Um, yeah, awesome. Okay. Looks like we lost Colin. I'll reach out to him and see if 2 weeks from now works for him. And but yeah, appreciate you guys. This is awesome. Excited to keep moving forward with this. So thank you, everybody.
See you guys.
See ya.